to Pineview, a quaint and peaceful town. The mist-covered hills, the small streets and markets, the slow pace of life make it a perfect place to escape from the demons of your past, according to one character. The kind of place where everyone is on a first-name basis, rumors spread like wildfire, and local businesses thrive. The kind of place where a murder has just been performed for the first time in almost a century, and so they call in the big guns. Enter Detective Michael Stone, a tough-as-nails, trenchcoat-wearing man with a troubled past who never fails to have a cigarette in hand. The grungy film noir hero you'd envision the moment you think the phrase murder mystery. Rainswept is categorized as an adventure game, though it is presented like a point-and-click. Objects in the environment, marked with an eye icon, can be observed and interacted with by first selecting them with X and then pressing a corresponding base button. You also have the ability to highlight objects that can be interacted with by hitting triangle, which is a useful tool usually found in point clicks, and cycle through objects within your range using R1 and L1. The majority of Rainswept will be spent going to locations within Pineview and talking to the locals in order to get to the bottom of the crime in question. There's maybe 3 points in time when you need to pick up an item and use it with another, and a single instance where you need to enter a code using a date wherein you're uncertain of the proper format, leading to a whopping 2 possible options. Otherwise, there's no puzzle solving the slightest. While I appreciate the attempt to create involved gameplay, there really wasn't much to do beyond talk to other characters by selecting from a pool of pre-selected dialogue options, somewhat like a visual novel-style game rather than what you'd think of when you think of the adventure genre. The most challenging aspect of Rainswept is navigating the map, which cannot be zoomed in and gives no indication where you are currently. It took a lot of trial and error for me to get where I need to go, and sometimes I just wandered from street to street until I finally stumbled into my next objective. The victims are Chris and Diane, a young couple who had moved to Pineview maybe 6 months prior to this incident. Local authorities have ruled their death as a murder-suicide almost immediately after checking out the crime scene and are reticent to think otherwise even though Detective Stone notices some inconsistencies. Naturally, the haste of this decision has nothing at all to do with the fact that a prolonged investigation would take more time and there's an important festival coming up in just a week that brings in tourists to patronize Pineview's local businesses. Oh, and by the way, it's pure coincidence that you have exactly a week to get to the bottom of what happened the night of October 6, 1996, before the case is deemed closed. As you continue your investigation and begin to question the locals, you'll notice a trend. Everyone in Pineview swears up and down that this couple that no one really got to know was bound for this fate. This is thanks to circulating rumors that stemmed from who knows where rather than actual knowledge, because no matter who you ask in this town of less than 20 people, the response starts with, "I didn't know them well," or "I only saw them once or twice." It's kind of sad once you think about it, how such a close-knit community could be so blasé about the existence of the members that didn't fit in, like a family ostracizing the black sheep. Rainswept touches on dark topics like suicide, abuse, guilt, and the drawbacks and failures of community, and it does it in a thought-provoking way by starting at the end of the young couple's story. Throughout the duration of the case, you're able to learn more about Chris and Diane, what kind of people they were, how they met, where they were before Pineview, and what they were up to while their neighbors turned a blind eye. In doing so, you learn more about what drives Detective Stone and why he gets too close to this particular case. The two stories unfold side by side, the young couple's delivered via flashbacks, in which you take control of Chris, and the detectives via dreams and an eventual confession from Michael Stone himself at the climax of the mystery's resolution. All in all, developer Frostwood Interactive does an excellent job of conveying a heartfelt tale and the gravity of the choices the characters of Rainswept face, despite the simplistic art style and lack of voice acting. I did find it interesting that Rainswept was presented the way it was, what with its simple wireframes with attached shapes as evident in the way characters are animated. Their proportions are less than human, which would cause a disconnect in empathy, but somehow it works. The simple shapes and colors do a good enough job of creating Pineview from the businesses on Main Street, to the cathedral on the hill, to the dreamscapes Detective Stone navigates during his paralytic nightmares. Coupled with a poignant instrumental OST, Rainswept's chosen art style does a fantastic job of creating atmosphere. I think if the presentation had been more polished, it would have been easier to take Rainswept more seriously in some scenes. Close-ups of characters, like in the scene where Detective Stone opens up, were jarring. The splash art presented upon loading up the game, for example, would have been a more powerful representation. That isn't to say that the dark and mature themes were ineffectively delivered, but that the gravity was somewhat diminished. I loved that all storylines within Rainswept were given closure by the end, leaving me with a sense of accomplishment after the credits rolled. That being said, if there was a second game that took place after Detective Stone returned home to the big city, detailing whether or not he was able to move past the trauma that had haunted him throughout the course of Rainswept, I'd definitely be interested. Unfortunately, Rainswept has performance issues, at least on PS4, that make it difficult to wholeheartedly recommend. In the 5 hours it took me to complete the campaign, the game crashed 3 times, forcing me back to the PS4's home screen and asking if I'd like to report the issue. There were also some graphical glitches, including characters walking through assets and a giant black box that ruined a pretty important scene. When that black box in question followed my currently controlled characters, I reloaded my save game thinking that would fix the problem. But instead, it placed me back at the last moment the autosave had recorded, sans any of the objects that had been there before, and therefore without any way to continue. Needless to say, I had to close out the game, and fortunately the objects that had vanished had been restored, but that could have easily gone south. Bottom line, I had a hard time scoring Rainswept after weighing what it did well versus what it didn't. On one hand, the mature themes within were handled well, but on the other hand, their delivery could have been better. There's also the matter of crashes and glitches, both of which could be addressed with a patch. In the interest of fairness, I give it a score of a 6.5, as it's got a better than average story with a more average delivery. If you can look past the bugs in its current state, Rainswept is worth a read at its asking price, and will take you about 5 hours to complete depending on how quickly you read. If you're looking for a grungy murder mystery in which you flex your crime-solving guns, you may want to look elsewhere. Thanks for checking out my review, gamers. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, share it around, make sure you subscribe, and stay in the know.